Well, hello. As you may know, I am kind of became that guy who just seems to hate free will for some reason. And I'm back to defend my stance. So just the other day I was asked, Joseph, can good and evil exist? And I quickly answered, no, it doesn't exist. Good and evil does not exist. And they answered with shock and confusion. What do you mean? How? Obviously, good and evil can exist. You're going to tell me that disease or murderers or rapists are good or bad? You can't tell me? It's so obvious. A child can tell the difference between good and evil. And I answered, well, the thing is, yes, we can say subjectively what we believe is good or bad. However, objectively, it's very difficult because the thing is, keep in mind, us killing people is considered bad. However, if you look at it at a much larger scale, we as people are bad for the planet. So by killing people, are we now suddenly doing something good? But then if you even go even farther back, the universe doesn't care if all of us, if every species here on this planet were to suddenly just vanish. The universe wouldn't even blink an eye. It would just keep doing what it's doing. It wouldn't really matter. So subjectively, yeah, I guess there is good and evil. However, objectively, no. There's not. So yeah, I guess you can have an opinion of whether good and evil exists, but objectively speaking, it clearly does not. Then I was told, all right, fine. Objectively speaking, I see what you're saying, but is there such a thing as good and bad people? Like, that's a really easy question to answer. And again, I said, no, it's impossible to have a good or bad person, because when someone is being judged to be good or bad, essentially what they're asking is the actions that this person is taking. Are they good and bad? That's what you're judging, the actions of the person. However, the action that the person is partaking in isn't their choice to begin with. Hence, why I'm talking about free will. So just to give a quick recap on that 15-minute video that I did already, if you haven't watched it or don't want to watch it, because it is very long, I understand. Essentially what I stated was that your decisions are based on your genetic code and your environment and nothing else. And you can't control your environment and you can't control your genetic code. So what is there to control? Nothing. So if you can't control the things that control your own actions, then you don't have control of your actions, period. It's very, very simple. And just to give a quick, just to summarize that whole video in one sentence, is essentially that people will always choose what they consider to be beneficial for them. That's it. Please pay close attention to when I said perceive. They perceive to be beneficial for them. Some people might consider a drug dealer to be bad, but the drug dealer isn't necessarily dealing drugs because they want to destroy people's lives. They're doing it because they want to pay their bills. Something that all of us would agree is not an inherently bad thing to do. And the person who even buys the drugs, some people would argue that people who are addicts are bad people. But the thing is, the addict doesn't do the drugs for the bad things. They don't do it for the consequences, the bad consequences. No one takes drugs so that they can harm another person or they can harm their own body. They take the drugs because they want to feel the high. They want to be able to take a break from life. Because let's be honest, life is hard on us sometimes. And a break would be very much appreciated. And again, going back to the word perceive, you also have to understand that genetically speaking, our intelligence or smartness, whatever you want to call it, is basically dictated by our genetic code. So how can we essentially choose what is essentially right for us if we don't necessarily have the smarts to do it in the first place? So some people will pick bad decisions thinking that it's actually overall best for them. So then that question kind of becomes silly. It becomes kind of silly because essentially what they're asking is not if there's good or bad people, but more like, are there people who are defective? Do I believe in defective people? And that's just kind of a silly question to ask. So then the question asked, then they just quickly asked me, how can I possibly not believe in free will? Because they feel like they have free will, so obviously it must exist. And well, essentially what I stated was that libertarian free will definitely does not exist. You do not have knowledge of all the options in front of you, so how can you be free to freely choose what you want if you don't know all the options available to you? If you have 50 options in front of you, but you can only see 2 of them, so you can only choose between those 2, that's not free will. You should be able to have access to all 50, but you don't. So libertarian free will definitely does not exist. But even going back to those 2, some people might say, well, I was able to choose between those 2, right? Well, no, you don't, because your genetic code and your environment dictate those two choices for you. For example, if it's bowls of ice cream, you have vanilla and chocolate, you're going to choose whatever it is based on your genetic code, your genetic predisposition, because you're going to be genetically predisposed to maybe not like chocolate. Like, I don't like chocolate, and I can't choose to like chocolate. I just don't. So I'm always going to choose the vanilla every time. Or maybe you like both chocolate and vanilla, but then you had a really bad childhood experience with chocolate, so now you don't like chocolate. That's your environment. Something you didn't choose for that to happen to you, but it did, and it forever is going to dictate your future choices. And that's just me just kind of dumbing it down. If you want a more in-depth talk about it, again, I have a 50-minute video on it. But the funny thing is, society already doesn't believe in free will. They just don't want to admit it. If you believe in horoscopes, you don't believe in free will. You're already stating that the stars essentially dictates your own and the actions of others, which I personally don't buy in. But if you believe in horoscopes, you already don't believe in free will. But what I do believe in is social psychology and neurology, and both of those studies show that we do lack in free will. Studies such as the Stanford Prison Study, which showed that people under extreme stress will do things that they wouldn't necessarily normally do. The Bobo Doll experiment showed that we are products of our environment in the sense that we learn from watching others and we copy them. The Milgram study, or the study where they would shock people, shows that we are predisposed, or more like pre-programmed, to obey authority figures. It's not normal for the masses, and I mean the vast majority, like 90-something% of people, to kill somebody by electrocuting them simply because somebody that we perceive to be an authority figure told us to do so. If we did have free will, the vast majority of us wouldn't be pushed to do such a monstrous act, and so easily, if I may add. The Ash-Line study showed that we conform, and conformity is not a bad thing. It pushes us to pay our taxes and to wait in line and be able to allow society to function well. But again, if conformity exists, because conformity exists, shows that free will also doesn't exist. We shouldn't conform if we truly had free will. The Gage accident shows that when our brain is physically damaged, our whole personality will change. And if free will did exist, that shouldn't be a thing. Why is it that the chemicals in our brain dictate our actions suddenly? And the list goes on and on and on. And my final point to show, if you still are not convinced, is marketing. If you believe in marketing, that marketing works, then you don't believe in free will. If free will truly existed, the fact that you want to buy this product should be random. The fact of your own free will, your own taste, that's it. There should be no variables. But the fact that I can manipulate you based on a 30-second commercial for you to buy this product shows that free will doesn't exist. If I can be able to choose strategies in which that if I put them in a certain sequence, that you are going to guarantee that you are guaranteed to buy this product, it shows that free will doesn't exist. I'm manipulating you. And the fact that you're manipulated so easily, again, shows a lack of free will. And to be quite honest, if you believe in a higher power, I personally think that's like the only argument against free will. But if you don't believe in a higher power, then what's stopping you from what's making you still believe in free will? That doesn't make any sense, to be quite honest. And when I actually did ask this person that question, what's stopping you? Because they did not believe in a higher power. They said, well, without free will, then life would be meaningless. And to be quite honest, it is. I already made a video on it, and this video is like 10 minutes, so you should watch it. It's a good one. Life is meaningless, and it's just a fact of life that you're just going to have to accept. 99% of the universe, it's just a barren wasteland. To be quite honest, the universe wouldn't give a single fuck if climate change wiped all of creation or life or whatever you want to call it here on this big blue planet. But the thing is, with life being inherently meaningless or inherently purposeless, there's beauty behind the statement. Because if your life had an inherent purpose, you'd have to live out that formulated life fully. You have no say as to how you would want to live your life. You'd have to live it without even asking if you could do something else. But because life is inherently meaningless, you yourself can give yourself subjective purpose by chasing things that make you happy, by living a life however you wish. And that's the beauty behind it. Because you can give yourself subjective purpose, and that's what makes life worth living, is a great thing. Because objectively speaking, life is purposeless. But again, I go more in depth in that in my other video. And the reason why we feel like we have free will is because, again, I believe it's evolutionarily beneficial. It allows us to be able to get rid of or take care of problematic people that are dangerous to society, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later in this video. So then they asked me, well, if free will doesn't exist, then the obvious question to ask is, can morality exist? And if you think about it, that's kind of a cruel question to ask, because what they're essentially saying is that because free will doesn't exist, am I accountable for actions that I take? So am I suddenly now allowed to hurt, torture, kill, ostracize, or even imprison innocent people? Because I don't have free will. It's not my fault that I'm doing it. So why should I be punished for doing these things? And that's very dark and twisted. But no, the thing is, free will doesn't exist today, but moral codes still exist. So it's obvious that morality can exist with the lack of free will, or free will just being an illusion. But what is morality then? Is it justice? No, it's not justice, actually. To be quite frank, the concept of justice is an abstract idea that is impossible to attain. For example, if someone were to kill another person, imprisoning that person or torturing that person or even killing that person is not going to make that pain you have for your loss suddenly go away. The person you lost is gone forever. The love you have for them, all that love you have for them that you want to give them, you can't. So justice is impossible to get, because no matter what you do to this person that killed your significant other or your loved one, no matter what you do to them, you're still going to be hurting. It's not going to bring them back. So morality is not justice. So is morality legal? Well, no, obviously it's not. Morality and legality are not the same thing. For example, let's talk about just drug use. And I'm not gonna get too into depth into it because I'm gonna work on another video about drugs and the morality of it, or better yet, questioning the morality of drug use. But for example, let's talk about heroin, probably one of the more dangerous drugs we have on the streets, essentially. At least that's what the numbers tell us. Is heroin, even though it is based on statistics, one of the most dangerous drugs on the street, as I've just said, is it immoral? Well, the thing is, taking that drug essentially is not immoral. It's what you do on that drug is immoral. But is it impossible for someone to take the drug responsibly? Because the thing is, drugs affect people differently based on their genetic code and also the environment that they're in. So if they're genetically not predisposed to do those terrible acts, or maybe put themselves in an environment in which they will not, execute those terrible acts, is it suddenly moral now? Or maybe even amoral? Well, it's definitely not immoral. So legality and morality are not the same thing at all. In fact, morality is actually much more simpler than that. Keep in mind that we as human beings are weak. We're prone to illness and injury, and we really need the herd to survive. And with that said, a community cannot optimally exist if we had murderers, rapists, thieves just running around. So when you read moral philosophical texts from either religious teachings such as Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, or even just philosophers like Kant, Mills, Ross, etc., if you really boil down all their ideas, they're all essentially saying the same thing. Basically, morals or morality is just a set of codes or a set of social rules that allow a group of people to coexist, to thrive as a community. And while these codes will vary from region to region or community to community based on the demands at hand. And I'll try to make sense of what I just said right now. It's immoral to be a thief, a rapist, or a murderer. This is based on Kant and Judeo-Christian text. And the reason why it is because you can't just have a community in which they're just running around freely, because then you start to question, all right, who's your friend, who's your foe? There'd be no trust with one another. And if there's no trust, people do not collectively work together in such a way that it's efficient and productive so that we can build roads, schools, hospitals, homes, whole civilizations. None of it would have been possible without being able to trust one another. Moving on, based on Mills or even Judeo-Christian text, we cannot just have depressed and overly worked adults just running around and leading the communities, because that's not efficient. Nothing would get done, or at least get done properly. And moving on, we can't have adulterers, according to Judeo-Christian text, running around having, just unprotected sex everywhere, because then the spread of STDs occurs. And why is this bad? Well, based on the time when Judeo-Christian text was written, they didn't have modern medicine. They didn't have the knowledge that we have today. And to be quite honest, syphilis, if left untreated, will kill you. it will kill you. And you can't have it so that just a whole community can be absolutely decimated because of an adulterer. You can't have that. Again, we need to be able to survive as a community because that's what morality is. So therefore, to be an adulterer is suddenly immoral, at least based on Judeo-Christian texts. So honestly, one can object to the last point of whether it still stands as moral today. And this begs the question, can current education and technology suddenly change moral codes? Well, it can. That's what makes moral codes subjective. But we have to treat these subjective codes as objective within the community so that we can all work together to be able, again, achieve survival. So morality being subjective does not take away from the fact that, more fundamentally speaking, morals or morality is just a set of codes that, again, allow society to work together in such a way that they may survive. So now the question left to answer is, can morality exist even though free will is just merely an illusion? And the answer is obviously yes. There will always be certain codes in which a group should follow based on their education, economic systems, and the varying hurdles the community has to overcome. For example, the environmental issues that we're facing today. And all of these things put together will shape those moral codes. We are pre-programmed to conform, as proven by the line study. We are evolutionarily pre-programmed, generally speaking, to seek survival, to be able to spread our genes. But with that said, codes will naturally manifest themselves even though we lack free will, because these moral codes are mutually beneficial for us all, because we want to guarantee survival. And as I said before, we want to survive because we are wired to desire that in the first place. So yes, even though free will doesn't exist, morals will still, and they do, exist. I hope you liked that video. I'm actually going to, make a quick little series, 1, 2, 3. This is the first one of the 3 about free will. The next one's gonna be on libertarianism. Is libertarianism moral? Is it moral to be a libertarian? More like is what I meant to say. And the final one would be, what does the lack of free will have to say about our current prison system? Should it be reformed, or should we even have a prison system to begin with? But again, more on that in a later video. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did watch it through the end, just know that I love you.